My name is Jocelyn Donat, and I am a proud Colgate graduate. I also hold the honorary role of being the past, present, and seemingly forever future president of Colgate's class of 1988. I hold this title simply because no one else will volunteer to take it. But more importantly, I am the global chair of the Colgate's Finance and Banking Networking Group. And I thought I was the New York City chair, for those that may have heard me speak before, but apparently I've been upgraded to the global chair, which I just think sounds so much more impressive. For those that aren't aware of or familiar with what Colgate's professional networking groups are, I'm going to tell you a little bit about them, and then we're going to share a video. Several years ago, Colgate launched a group of professional networks to provide alumni and parents with an opportunity, parents of students, to meet, network, eat, drink, interact, and possibly advance their own career paths by expanding their Colgate contacts and connections at regional events like this one tonight, or even virtually through through our LinkedIn group. So over the past year alone, these professional networks have delivered programming to hundreds of alumni, parents, students in cities across the country. And in New York alone, we've seen a series of programs for all types of Colgate professionals, including Fundraising 101 at IAC headquarters for investors and entrepreneurs, real estate tours of the Brookfield Place commercial properties near One World Trade Center, and Entrepreneur Common Good Digital Media and Tech Hackathon in New York City in partnership with TIA, and other events similar to the one we are holding here tonight. So tonight we are presenting a cross-networking program with both the Banking and Finance and Lawyers Association networking groups in our area. And the goal of tonight's program is to provide insights on where law and finance intersect, as well as to have some fun, make some new connections, and have some drinks. In summary, just so everyone's aware, we're doing great things with these networking groups for alumni and parents and students. If we could encourage you to continue to attend events like this, tell others about attending, that would be greatly appreciated. Any opportunities that you can to help in your own corporation, to find opportunities for students, and you'll hear more about this for the future, to help the Colgate connections for those on campus and beyond, is always greatly appreciated. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Ken Zeman, class of 87, Deputy Practice Leader of Corporate Restructuring at SCAD. Thanks.
Thanks, Jocelyn. Really appreciate it. And thank you, everybody. Thank you for all for coming tonight. For those of you who were able to attend last year, you'll see that the room is now twice as full. Part of that has to do with the fact that I'm not on a panel this year, and just agreed to moderate and to introduce our panel chair. As Jocelyn said, this year's panel is on M&A and developments in M&A, and that's obviously an intersection of the utmost between law and finance. Just another plug, though, for the professional networks. These were launched to build these connections, both lifelong connections for alumni and for current students as they become alumni. And obviously, we encourage everyone's participation in that. With that, I'd just like to introduce our moderator of the panel, Rob Kindler, who's a 76 graduate from Colgate. Rob's had a law and finance career. Rob started his law career at Cravath, Swaine, where one of our other panelists, Barshay, my fraternity brother, who's now co-head of the corporate department. Just as an aside, that's an astonishing feat. That, we were like fraternity brothers, another one of our fraternity brothers in the back. The fact that any of us are here at all. I'm sure many of you were saying the same thing to one another right now about your other fraternity, and so our fraternity brothers are just classmates. But not to take away from Rob, of course. Rob has had a tremendous career. He was a partner of Cravath. He left Cravath to go to J.P. Morgan. He rose to basically global head of investment banking there. And in 2006, went to Morgan Stanley and is now vice chairman of ISG and global head of their mergers and acquisitions group. So with that, I'll introduce Rob, and Rob will bring up the rest of the panel.
Oh, it's good to be here. Thank you very much, Ken. And just to show that we have a virtuous circle here, all these folks are M&A people. Melina is a board member, but she also was part of financing a lot of deals when she started and ran the mezzanine fund for Goldman. So our job is basically to do deals, and then Ken's job is when they fail, which they inevitably do, to restructure them. So we kind of have it covered all the way around. As far as our panel, which I'm very proud of, we do have Scott Barshay. Scott and I were partners together at Cravath, and Scott runs the corporate department there and also has been involved in some of the most high-profile deals, including just recently doing the Ambev deal and Swaine and Starwood deal, right? And then he totally failed in Mylan's hostile opposition in Paragon. We defend Paragon. It is a miracle that we got Scott to be here, because since we shut down Deke, he hasn't returned my calls. Melina, as I said, Higgins, really was a rock star at Goldman Sachs, starting their mezzanine fund, which is really, it became a huge, huge fund providing financing. And then she was wise enough to go on to other things. I've been a banker for a very long time, and there's an old saying about, what do you call a 61-year-old investment banker? The answer is a failure, because I am still doing this. Melina went on to do other things, and she's on the board, a couple of boards, Genworth and also on Mylan. And then we have Patrick Ramsey, who is at the Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, runs North American M&A. And I've stayed close to Patrick over the years. We've done deals together, and he's going to actually do this off. And we have David Allinson and Latham, who does a lot in the private equity area. So we just asked everyone to come up, and then we'll lead off. So there you go. And I'm going to sit because I just had knee surgery. By the way, are we on? Okay, good, we're on. So we are going to talk about the M&A environment. But I would just like to say a couple of things. My son Dylan this year, who was a banker, and then decided to go to Warby Parker as an entrepreneur. My other son, Bill, was his 30th birthday today. And he also spent time as a banker, and then did something entrepreneurial with school. So it's again, we're there, all this kind of connectivity. So Patrick is going to lead us off kind of on what's going on generally in M&A. And the great thing about being an M&A person is it's always a good time for M&A. It really doesn't matter what the circumstances. So if the stock market's way up, it's a terrific time to do stock deals. If the stock market's down, it's a terrific time to do cash deals. It really doesn't matter. It's always a great time for M&A, except when it isn't. And so Patrick will take us through what appears to be a pretty good time. So take it away, Patrick.
Great, thanks, Rob. And I'm going to kick off with, and by the way, Ken, I don't think I've been in Skadden for a lot of meetings. I don't think I've ever been in a conference room this big, right? It must be 4 or 5 conference rooms deep. So I'm going to make a couple of quick confessions. One is, Ken, on the kind of shock of it all and being here. If people only knew what happened back in Hamilton, David and I were actually fraternity brothers as well, but we've already agreed that we've got enough material on each other that we can both keep quiet. Yeah. The other thing I'm going to say is, Jossie talked about insights, bringing law and M&A together, insights around it, and she also said fun. So on this panel, I'm the fun guy. So in the reception afterward, the people who aren't interested in insights but are interested in fun, please come talk to me. Okay, so on the market overview, that Rob referred to, we've got 4 slides which we thought could be helpful. The first simply looks at level of activity. And these bars are just aggregate volume of deals going back 20 years. And you can see trough to peak, and then trough to something. Maybe it's a peak now. And the observation I'd make on this page is a very simple one, which is and probably well known to most in this room. You look at the level of activity this year, year to date, and that's the far right column on the chart. We're running today at nearly the level that we ran at in the last peak in 2007. And that's you see the two circles, the numbers up above, that one toward the middle is 2007. So we're running at nearly peak levels globally. As you kind of look out and you say, well, where are we going from here? What this chart does is it takes 2007 and 2015 year to date and just splits it by region. And I think we tried to adopt the Colgate colors, so it may make it hard. There's actually 3 here. There's a dark maroon and there's a medium maroon. The dark maroon at the bottom of each chart is 2007 versus 2015 year to date, so through early November, so 10 out of 12 months. Look at the dark maroon. We're already running in the Americas above the level of activity that we saw in the last peak in 2007, which was the highest level of activity we've ever seen. In APAC, which is the gray at the top, same story, already running above prior peak levels. Look at EMEA. We're year to date at about half the level you saw in the last peak. We all, and you say, is that going to change? At some point, it has to. And when we think about where is the activity and the growth going to come from going forward, maybe plenty more to do in the Americas, plenty more in APAC. There certainly is, but a disproportionate amount of the growth has got to come from, and will come from EMEA. Third of four is, I'm going to hit this one real quick. These bars are just global GDP. The line is M&A activity as a percent of global GDP. The simple point here is when you think about, where is the next peak going to be? Most people would say we'd say it's got to be a lot higher than the last peak. And why is that? It's because global GDP today is 20 to 25% higher than it was in 2007, and we're running, even at today's level, at M&A activity as a percent of GDP, well below what we've seen in prior peaks. And then the last slide is just what's been going on over the last few months amongst all this market choppiness, and what do you expect going forward. I'm going to leave the prediction on exactly where the M&A market is going to the gentleman at my right. But what I would say is in the chart at the top left that's just equity indices, emerging markets, levered equity indices, and as most are aware, we've seen some real volatility in the last few months, late August in particular, and then late September, and those are the two lines. Credit market is down below, plenty of volatility in the credit markets as well. What has that done to M&A activity? That's the chart on the right. This is just number of deals announced greater than $500 million in size. That yellow line is average per week over the last 12 months. And then you look at the actual weekly activity since that market volatility set in, and you see nearly half of those weeks we've been at a well below average weekly levels of deal activity. And it's a simple point there that amidst the market volatility, it gets harder to do deals. It gets harder to bring them together. It gets harder for CEOs and boards to pull the trigger, and that's going to flow through in terms of level of activity. But we've seen plenty of weeks as well where it's been up. So simple point is it's going to be it's been bumpy over the past few months, and it's undoubtedly going to be bumpy looking ahead as we work ourselves to the next peak.
That's great. This is really cool. There's a lot of people here. When you look out, you don't really realize all the people that were here. In fact, Pat is here. Pat was my girlfriend in 7th grade. Totally true, 48 years ago. I'm actually not kidding. And she's here. Jim is my classmate. We have a lot of other classmates here. But I kid you not. Good turnout. What can I say? I'm just so happy. And by the way, we broke up because her parents wouldn't let her go to my apartment, so totally can't go with you. As far as M&A goes...
They let her come tonight, though.
No, she did, thank you. As far as what I think may end this, the M&A trade, because so many of the things that people have talked about, like low interest rates, have actually been around for quite a while. It's been 5 years we've had very low interest rates, and so that isn't new. And even availability of leverage, that really isn't new. So my own view is that what's really caused the M&A boom in the last really year and a half is that there really hasn't been as much stock market volatility. 2 years ago, we had wild swings every day. People forget that. Now if we have a 200 or 300 point swing and a 17,500 down, that's considered big. Well, that was nothing two years ago. So as Patrick said, that kind of volatility is really what is likely to slow down M&A. But I'd like to get from Melina's perspective, because she's on a couple of boards. She's also been in the M&A world for a long time, having been on the financing side. Kind of, what are boards thinking about in M&A? And are they looking at it as a tool for growth? I mean, when boards are thinking about deals, what's on their mind?
Sure. Well, the list of things that boards think about related to M&A is incredibly extensive, and frankly, once you think you've got one thing solved, something else tends to pop up. But I would say boards are looking at M&A as a vehicle for growth. I think it's been a really difficult period for a lot of companies to achieve, great organic growth. And as we've seen, there's been a lot of M&A activity. There's also been a lot of share repurchases, which have really helped companies, improve their earnings and profile. I would say with regards to how boards think about it, I would say the first thing that one thinks about on the M&A, really focusing on the acquisition side, is what's the strategic rationale for the acquisition. And one thing is clearly growth, which is expand product lines, expand distribution, enter into new geographies. And similarly, there have been a lot of acquisitions that have been focusing on cost cutting. There's the ability to achieve significant synergies. You've seen a lot of acquisitions get done where the amount of headline synergies are in the billions of dollars. And that's been a real focus for boards and companies as well, both on the growth side and the cost-cutting side. With regards to the financial impact, a big thing boards focus on is it accretive or dilutive? How is this going to affect our earnings going forward? So, I think on the financial side, it's what are the synergies, accretion, dilution, what's it going to do to our credit ratings? That's been a big focus for people. Is this going to make us over-levered? And then given the forum that we're in here, I'd say another key thing we look at is what are the legal, regulatory, antitrust issues. There's obviously a ton of that, and I've been working extensively with Scott over the past year, and we've got great advice from them and have looked at a lot of different issues.
We still lost.
And then, I guess in terms of just, the last point I'll make is, whenever you're looking at an acquisition, there's always, an opportunity cost. And so I think more and more people are looking at not just what does this acquisition do, but what else could we be spending the money on? And that could include a different acquisition, that could be investing it in organic growth, but it could also include a lot of financial things these days where you're looking at, would it be better spent just buying back shares? Or would it be better spent paying a dividend? And so that's, I think, a lot of the things the board thinks about.
I mean, did you some of it, some of the people at least think that a lot of what's driving M&A is that you just can't get growth in your underlying business. Now, at Genworth, you both sold businesses and tried to right-size it. But at Mylan, at least the view has been, and obviously Mylan's performed very well, but that they really need to do things to get growth. And so is that a big driver?
I would say for Mylan, not so much. Mylan actually has a lot of organic growth. For us, it's been, it's not been a strategy of just acquiring things from a financial perspective. Our acquisitions have really been more strategic, whether that be entering new geographies, entering new product lines. A lot of things we've done this year have expanded us in those two areas. We've really expanded our presence internationally, both in emerging markets in Europe, and also we just entered a new product line, which we really see as a new platform for a whole new set of products.
I'd like to ask David to kind of go through kind of how, kind of a couple of aspects of it, but how the debt markets play into M&A, but also since a lot of your business is private equity, and there actually haven't been a lot of public to private deals, but there's still been a lot of private equity deals.
Right.
But how is that all playing out now in the market?
Sure. Just thinking about the year in M&A, I was trying to think back to the beginning of the year when you sort of try to predict or project out how the year would go, and obviously it's been a great year in M&A, probably for the reasons that everyone's been describing so far. When you sort of take a step back and you look at what helped create that nice ripe environment for M&A, it does depend on what part of the M&A market you're talking about. There's a lot of M&A activity, huge uptick in strategic deals this year. Private equity activity, although it's been very good on the sell side, it's been choppy depending on where you are in the private equity market. So, for example, the big blue chips, the Blackstones, the Carlyles of the world, their volumes are down for the year. I think partly because they're seeing a lot of excessive valuations. Sell side has been good, but then middle market private equity, which is anything from the $500 million fund to the $6 billion fund. So those were deals from $100 million to a few $billion plus. They've been pretty active, and it does depend on that sector. So the reasons why, as Rob was saying, that interest rates have been very low for a very long time. So for private equity firms, obviously getting cheap debt is a key ingredient to do their deal making. And the debt markets have been, debt has been cheap, debt has been plentiful. Again, that's been most of the story this year. Around August, the debt market started to tighten. Now, when you sort of look at the broader M&A market, and private equity and competing with strategics or just strategic deals where private equity is not involved, one of the things we've seen a lot of is that companies have been confident about their strategic plan, right? As Rob mentioned, there's less volatility in the market. There's less uncertainty, partly fueled by some companies believing that there isn't as much organic growth out there, and that a better way to obtain growth is to buy it and to acquire companies. And so once you saw a combination of those factors, I think it helps explain the big increase in M&A. And then if you look at the amount of stock that's used as consideration, that obviously has also been a very big uptick this year, especially so far the back half. And part of the reason why is we're seeing very healthy equity valuations, certainly in the United States, notwithstanding the blip in August and the additional volatility. But on a relative basis, cash is not as good of a currency, even though a lot of companies have a tremendous amount of cash on their balance sheet as stock. And there are certain deals where the deals are so large, Scott's beer deals, where they're so large that they have to be stock deals because you're not going to find that much cash, even though we would like to try. So, and of course, everyone's been reading a lot about inversions, and even though the inversion rules have gotten tighter and some of the tax benefits are a little bit harder to obtain, still there's a lot of strategic M&A, meaningful strategic M&A, which is certainly driven by the goal of having inversion, reincorporating in a foreign jurisdiction where you're not going to pay 35% tax, corporate tax. And it will be interesting to see how that plays out, whether or not there's any sort of further changes to the rules. But again, it is certainly driving M&A. And I'd say the last thing I would say when you look at stock, like just take an example of, again, every sector can be different, but look at energy, right? Energy, oil's been very volatile. Obviously, there are a lot of oil and gas companies with battered balance sheets. That story is still unfolding. You'll see, I think, a lot more distress in the market, especially as every other day you're reading about $40 oil. But at the same time, look at the strategic M&A that's occurring. There's a lot of energy companies who believe that their valuations, that they've been battered, but they're not going to sell for cash because they think they're undervalued. So you're actually even seeing more strategic M&A in that space because energy companies would rather combine, shore up their balance sheet with stock, stay in the game, and then try to ride valuations up if and when the market recovers. That will be interesting to see how it plays out. I predict that we'll see you'll certainly see some winners and losers in that market, and you will also see other participants coming in doing opportunistic deals, whether they're companies and also private equity who's been very busy in the energy space.
Just on this amount of money that's available for deals, it's really extraordinary. If you look at the deal InBev for SAB, just mountains of money. The EMC Dell deal that was just done a couple of weeks ago. What's also been interesting is that you can issue stock cross-border now. We advised Verizon when it bought out Vodafone, aside from raising $80 billion without any issue, it issued its stock overseas. So I just want to ask Scott kind of a couple of questions. First, on the whole global aspect and whether there's anything on the legal side that's made deals easier or harder to do. Also, kind of a focus on, I know you obviously can't comment on the InBev deal, but just regulatory generally and how that's affecting doing deals. And then most importantly, if you could give us the names of the leaders of the Deke Underground.
The who underground? I don't even recognize the initials you're using. All right, so let's go in reverse order. Now let's start at the beginning. So look, from a regulatory front, Rob, it's getting tougher, and I'm not sure if that's because the regulators are getting tougher, or it's because we're just doing bigger deals and trying to get more synergies out of companies that, probably ought not be together because they control too much of the market, and that's how come they can get so many synergies, especially in this case on the revenue side. I don't know the answer. My sense is Europe is getting tougher over the last, year to 18 months. I don't know. Other people, I don't know if you guys want to nod your heads or shake your heads, but my sense is that Europe's getting tougher. I'm not involved in the Halliburton Baker Hughes deal, but I don't know if you guys are, but that could get blocked, and I don't think any of us thought that it was going to get blocked when it got announced. So I think Europe's getting tougher, and the U.S. is getting a little less predictable in the Obama administration. I think we're seeing the FTC and DOJ get tougher. Now, the real regulatory issue that we now all face on every single deal, though, is China. China has developed over the last 2 or 3 years a very robust, I'll call it regulatory regime. I call it antitrust, but it's not really antitrust. It's China decides they're not sure they like a deal for whatever reason, and you're caught up in a bureaucracy there where there are rules that go back to 1949 that don't work in the modern era, which can cause incredible delays, very long delays, and uncertainty in getting deals done. It's more uncertainty in timing. They're not blocking the tremendous number of deals, but they can take a very long time. It's a similar issue, but not quite as bad in Russia. So that's sort of the regulatory front. In terms of these crazy cross-border deals, I'll be happy if I never see another one. We had this year we had ABI's deal with SAP, and I had Mylan's Teva Perigo deal, and I never want to deal with Ireland or the UK again. Those.
They probably feel the same way.
For different reasons.
Those regimes there are almost bizarre and really can take away from flexibility in how you do a deal. You can't have an agreement. If you're in the UK or you're in Ireland, you can't have an agreement where somebody commits to actually do things, like give you financial statements, agree that you can sell off, certain, assets of the company. They're just not allowed to agree to do anything. The target in the UK and Ireland just not allowed to agree to do anything. Totally foreign to the way we look at the world. And from a disclosure standpoint, if there is a quote-unquote leak, which could be a newspaper article that just speculates that somebody may be looking to buy a UK or Irish company, they have to put out a disclosure right then and there. That is really bad for doing deals, right? When you're in the middle, you're in the early stages of a negotiation, and all of a sudden the takeover panel calls up in either country and says, well, there was this article and your stock dropped 5%, it went up 5% because of this article. Well, of course it did. There's an article speculating we might be taken over. Of course our stock price went up. Well, if you're talking to anyone, you got to put out a press release that describes it. That has really gotten in the way, and now I'm not on Mylan or SAP anymore. Another deal I did basically knocked a UK company out of sort of contention to be involved in a MOE deal that has gotten done in the recent past. Our regulatory regime, our sort of legal regime on takeovers in the United States is not great, right? It's not like we're the end-all be-all. It's a lot better than in the UK or Ireland. So it's tough to do deals there.
It is somewhat ironic because people always viewed the UK and Ireland as kind of an easy place to do deals because the targets can't take so-called frustrating actions. But in fact, the way the rules work, just taking the Perigo case where a bidder has to go best and final, and then it's impossible towards the end to change your bid to get those last tenders in. Pfizer had the same situation with AstraZeneca. So it actually has become more difficult. Scott's statement about the unpredictability of Obama is absolutely true. And just to give an example, a deal that Scott and I worked on, I advised Continental and Scott advised United Airlines. And so Continental...
We take no responsibility for how they're operating right now.
No, that's true. But Continental, which was, you could call it the acquirer because its management was taking over. But the point being that whoever was the acquirer or not, they decided we're going to move the headquarters to Chicago and we are going to name the company United, all Chicago-based, solely because the president and Rahm Emanuel. And that deal got no review at all. And totally got no review. And I remember Scott and I I was a banker for Continental, we were in the room when the CEOs were signing, and they said, yep, just got off the phone with Rahm Emanuel. He was chief of staff then, before, and it was basically, hey, that's great for Chicago. No review. Then when American Airlines tried to do its merger with US Air, the government tried to block it. Well, it hardly had grounds to stand on, right, given to let the other deal go through. It's just not a good regime where you literally have no idea, how things are going to come out. And the other statement that Scott made as far as China, it's a problem because because it's unpredictable, how long things are taking. I don't know, Patrick, from your guys' practice, how does it get reflected in deal certainty and what people think about it?
Yeah, well, on China, I would just our experience echoes what Scott described, and I think on virtually every deal that we work on today, where the deal is going to be subject to review in China, it's inevitably the long pole in the tent as advisors and legal counsel works through a contract, works through termination date, works through elements of the deal, timing of the deal, and duration of the financing. It's all oriented around China and how long is it going to take to get there. I think, Scott, you made the point that it's less about are we going to get there, and more about the timing. And I have to tell I did say I was the fun guy, so I have to tell a fun story. So we represented Ecolab a few years ago when it bought a company called Nalco, and
I represent Melina.
Okay. Well, there's a good example of.
Is this story going to be at his expense?
Bring it on, let's go.
I'll try to work that in. But so in that deal, China was the long pole in the tent, and I don't know. I think we broke some record at the time, and several years ago, the maturity and level of sophistication of the Chinese antitrust authorities was kind of paled in comparison to where they are today, and they're still learning today. But back then, we got it done in something like record time from China. And the reason that happened, and Scott, I don't know if you know this, but someone on the country head for Ecolab had an assistant that knew the assistant of the key minister in the Chinese antitrust authority, and
you know what? I don't want to know.
made a phone call, and that's what it's that phone call that expedited the clearance of the.
We just hope it was just a phone call.
Just a phone call. Melina, you had said something before about what boards look at in looking at deals, accretion, dilution, and best use of capital. But one of the things that you didn't say, that I'm sure you guys think about, is kind of intrinsic value of the target and return on equity. Because my own prediction is that a lot of deals are getting done now just because the acquirer's stock goes up, and because it's, quote, an accretive deal. Obviously, if Google buys anyone, it's going to be an accretive deal because they trade at such a high multiple. But how much are boards literally forcing management and their bankers to look at intrinsic value of companies?
I'm sure it really varies. I mean, without naming any names, I can think of quite a few companies that seem to be doing acquisitions more because they're accretive than they have any particular strategic value to the business. It might just be a bunch of dispersed assets, but by acquiring them and having a higher multiple, and somehow the street is giving them credit now, this acquired business now, for a higher multiple, for example, or they can just borrow so cheaply, it's immediately accretive. I think there has been a lot of that in the market. I can say the things I've been involved with, I think we really do have tried to avoid that. We have actually reviewed things at the board level where we've looked at it and said, well, that would be accretive, and we'd get a pop on that, but that's just a financial transaction. It doesn't really do anything for the business. And we're trying to really buy long-term strategic assets and take a longer-term view on, once we buy it, what can we do with it? And I think our track record is more related to adding to the asset and making it part of the business.
And just somewhat of a follow-up on that, with Scott and then with David, is activism. Because I actually, even though I spent a good deal of my time advising companies subject with activism, but I actually think activism on balance has been good, because it forces companies to not create conglomerates that don't make any sense. So an example where someone went the other way was Freeport-McMoRan, that a couple of years ago did an affiliated transaction with an oil and gas company. That generally doesn't happen because people are worried about what the activists are going to say. So just kind of get, Scott, first your view and then David's view on activism and what it means in the market. I know that you've advised a lot of companies, including Cheniere, who capitulated immediately. Almost all the companies you advise capitulate right away, but just your general view.
That's all true. So we're now heading into the depressed part of the evening. It's like a Colgate night at a fraternity party, and everybody leaves, and you're sitting there, with just the tap and your mug and yourself, and that's just because activism is incredibly depressing if you're on the defense side of things, which all of us here are. Activism, M&A is fun, it's sexy, it's cool, and activism sucks. And it sucks for two reasons. The first reason is because unlike a few years ago, every company is vulnerable. Every company is vulnerable, and that's because the activists have so much money now. The hedge fund activists have so much money now to put to work. And why do they have so much money? Well, they were performing better than the other asset classes, and they got money. And people put their money with the managers who were making the money. Now they have incredible amounts of money. And I was shocked. One of my clients, who Rob knows well, Qualcomm, found that they had JANA partners in the stock overnight at $2.5 billion. I'm like, wow. Well, a few months later, Bill Ackman put, I think, $5.5 billion into Mondelez. It's like, holy crap! That's just crazy. The numbers we've never seen before. So that's the first thing that makes it depressing. But it would be okay if it weren't for the second thing, which is, for the most part, you can't beat these guys. It's like they're going into a game of one-on-one in basketball up to 21, and you spot them 20. Right? That's what it's like, because they only are these days getting involved with companies when they talk to all the stockholders, and then all the big stockholders, other than the index funds, and the big stockholders have said, hey, here are the bunch of companies we want you to go after. We're not happy with the returns we've been getting. So then the activists look at that list and say, well, I like this one, maybe I'll go into that one. And so they're going in with the shareholders already on their side, and it makes it very difficult to win in a proxy fight. If you actually take them on in a proxy fight, you can find yourself like Ellen Coleman, the CEO of DuPont, who actually took on Nelson Peltz in a proxy fight. She won, and then, 3 months, 4 months later, out of a job. Because, well, we won't get into the because, but out of a job. And so it's actually better these days, and I didn't feel this way a few years ago, but it's almost always better if you can get a good deal cut at the beginning, which usually involves putting a couple of people on the board, usually somebody from the activist shop, or their friends and family, sometimes third parties. You put them on the board. They're usually not that bad on the board. Sometimes they are, but usually they're not that bad on the board. It's just easier to surrender. And so, as Rob says, my clients don't usually waste a lot of time. And by the way, Shaneer I believe was Morgan Stanley's client.
Yeah, we capitulated together. But
we really capitulated in record time. I was very proud of that one.
Isn't Shaneer seriously run by a Colgate guy, right? Or is it a different company?
He's a Colgate guy.
He's a Colgate guy.
He is a Colgate guy. Yeah. He is one of the most colorful people.
No, seriously, this is like
in the oil patch.
Yeah.
He's
what's the guy's name?
It's Sharif.
Yeah.
He's a great guy, but tough client. He
love to get.
He wanted to surrender even more quickly than I did.
Do you know what his first business was?
No.
I do not.
He opened up a hamburger restaurant.
Wow. This guy's made a lot of money. And by the way, his view, honestly, was Carl Icahn showed up, wanted board seats, and the guy said, what do I care if Carl Icahn's on the board? I'm going to do whatever I want to do anyway. So.
What he actually said was, I want Carl Icahn on the board so he can understand how to do things right. That's a direct quote.
So David Latham has had much more success than Cravath on activism. So what's your views?
I agree that sort of the board's perspective in dealing with activists has changed, somewhat dramatically over the last couple of years. Partly because, as Scott was saying, they've been just so successful, and Now, although while I agree that they've been successful for good reasons, partly, forcing companies to relook at their balance sheet and strategic plan, at the same time, I'd say they're almost too successful because I think they're creating a lot of extra activity and causing, my personal view, boards sometimes to have to be a little bit short-sighted, and I don't want to say jettison their long-term strategic plans, but when you have an activist in this, you have to deal with it. So, as Scott was saying, the old playbook used to be, bunker down, you're going to fight, you're not going to talk, you're not going to engage, you see if you can, win the battle. Obviously, after seeing that is a very, unsuccessful strategy in the vast majority of times, I think boards now are more receptive to activists' requests, and certainly more receptive in engaging in a real dialogue. I also agree with Scott that engaging in a real dialogue early and even letting them in the inside early often does result in better outcomes. But I think we'll see a lot more activism, as Scott was saying too. The amount of money that's going to the funds is tremendous, and we're talking about success rates. I mean, if you looked at, in last year, the number of activist campaigns, I think over 75% of them were successful in some way. They either, caused the company to divest an asset, caused the company to give back cash. They were able to get, a major number of directors on the board. And when you see that sort of success, especially, in this environment, I think a lot of extra money is going to come into it. My cynical view is that with all the additional money coming in, you'll see a lot of activity, which isn't necessarily good for the long term, but nonetheless, you'll see activity.
Well, I think the capitulation that we're all referencing, the reality is it's a little bit of losing the battle to win the war. Right? No company, no board, no senior management team wants to put their company through a proxy fight, especially one which you're destined to lose. And what the activists are looking for when they're running a proxy fight, it's not control of the board. It's 1, 2, or 3 seats. And then you've got the proxy advisory firms who a lot of the institutions listen to or take direction from as to what they ought to do, yay or nay. I don't know, what's the stat, Scott or Rob or David? 80% of the time? The ISS is what the key proxy advisory firm is recommending their institutional clients vote in favor of the activist slate. And the basic logic, it obviously varies from situation to situation, is how can some new voices hurt? It's not control of the board. How can some new voices hurt? How can some new perspective hurt in terms of the board dynamic, and that more accomplished activists have evolved in who they're putting forward as their board nominees are not necessarily themselves or just themselves, but they're truly qualified and experienced individuals with kind of relevant expertise in whatever the sector happens to be.
Yeah, we are going to open up the questions in a second. I'd just make an observation just generally on activists as well. The money that goes to activists is the same institutional money that goes to any of these funds. So it's college endowments, pension plans. So I don't find anything inherently evil about it, and they're trying to get returns. Having said that, if I could short the whole asset class, I would do it, because there's too much money and too little opportunities. And the example that Scott gave, where Ackman, who's had an awful year between Valiant and others, but there was already an activist in Mondelez, and then he decides to put $5 billion more. I mean, you got to wonder if a guy like that can't find opportunities. So I think that asset class is in trouble, frankly. So we did want to open up questions for people. Pat was going to ask me how the bar mitzvah was that she missed. It was awesome. It was just awesome. But and if we don't have questions, we'll just keep talking. But does anyone have questions? Do we have microphones? Do you have anything? Mr. Shedlin.
I I was curious,
Okay.
fascinated by the
Mr.
discussion.
Kramer.
Fascinated by the discussion of China, and I wonder
I have no official.
who do you hire as legal advisors when you're doing a deal into China?
Not scared. No, who do you hire?
We're still, honestly, every deal we keep trying to find somebody who knows the secretary to the secretary, and we have not been able to find the law firm that we've been able to say, wow, you know, these guys know how to get things done in this country.
Have any of the American law firms, you know, really gotten on the regulatory side ensconced in over there that helpful?
No, I don't think so. I mean, most American law firms, you know, they'll have you know, somewhat of a presence in Beijing, Shanghai, Hong Kong, of course, but you can't really penetrate the market. You have to work with local counsel. I mean, you're not even sort of.
And didn't Cravath at one point try to go into China and spectacularly fail?
I think that was your idea, Rob.
Okay, fine. And you, Allison.
So, just along the China theme, what are they trying to extract from the delay? Like, what kind of concession? What do they want?
So this all goes back to a deal where Chevron was buying Unical. I was representing Chevron in that. And CNOOC, one of the Chinese national oil companies, came in and was willing to pay $1 billion plus more than Chevron was going to pay. And it ended up stoking up a tremendous amount of nationalistic fervor in this country that ended badly for CNOOC, and however it happened, CNOOC ended up withdrawing its bid. And I think following that, the Chinese put this new regime in place, which I think, among other things, is just sort of payback. I think there's an element of payback saying, if other countries can hold us up, we can hold them up. And it's gotten worse more recently because the United States has been awfully tough on Chinese companies buying assets in the United States if they can arguably be related to national security. That's point one. Point two is they are focused on their national champions in that country, which is not, and nothing evil about it. Europe has often done the same thing. They're focused on their national champions, and they're sometimes looking for opportunities to help their national champions get some extra assets or stop a deal that might hurt their competitiveness within China. So it's a combination of things, but it all boils down to, again, they're not generally holding up deals. They're just taking forever to approve them.
And if you take the CNOOC deal, which was extraordinary, I was advising CNOOC as a banker, and they went in and put a topping bid in.
One for the good guys.
Right, and they were putting the bid for Unical, and all of a sudden there was this how can the world, can you let a Chinese company buy Unical? There were hearings on the Hill. Well, the facts, and here are the facts. 96% of the assets of Unical were in Indonesia.
They were all in Southeast Asia.
It had absolutely nothing at all to do with the U.S. Nothing, zero. And Chevron was masterful at making this a big issue. The fact that Condoleezza Rice was in the government at the time, a former Chevron board member, had everything to do with it. So yeah, and we really made, as a country, we made a very bad mistake in blocking that, essentially blocking the deal from political reasons, because there's been a lot of backlash. Last year I represented Shineway, who wanted to did buy Smithfield Foods, which is a pork producer. They were started again, hearings on Capitol Hill. How can you let the Chinese buy a pork producer? I don't know what the national interest is in that. And their biggest argument was that, heparin, which is a blood thinner, you make out of pork products. And how could you let the Chinese control that? Well, as it happens, the Chinese already make 100% in February. But that did not stop having nothing to do with people.
I represented one of the losing people in that auction, and I thought food supply was a huge national security issue myself, honestly.
That's the control of bacon. All right, so, question back there?
I had a question about activism. You guys talked about why you guys listen to activists a lot more frequently and that you capitulate a lot quicker. Do boards ever consider activist-free consulting? Because you know they're talking to Business Insider, you know they're putting their 365-page deck up online as soon as they put out a press release that they're going activist. Do you guys ever say, well, I'll listen to them so I don't have to pay $1 million to McKinsey?
Melina?
Not really. No. I have to say, I'd love to hear an example if people have it, but I don't think the activists are frankly doing incredible, recommending incredible things that frankly the company and the board hasn't potentially thought of already. I think they're proposing oftentimes things that are very much in their interest because they bought it, now they've agitated to, and just because they're involved, now the stock price is going to go up, and as soon as they have a chance, they're going to get out. So I don't personally think that I've seen a lot of instances where they've proposed something so amazingly new that anybody wouldn't have necessarily thought that already.
And then you find sometimes when you have, Dan Lowe took a position in Sony, and I was advising Sony, and he's explaining how they can make better movies. So, no, I think you could consider it free consulting, and you basically get what you pay for. Any other questions? We're actually bumping up against time.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I'm going to take this in a slightly different direction. You've all been doing M&A for a number of years. M&A is, obviously a pretty hardcore, labor-intensive work environment. How has talent changed over the years, particularly as there's a lot of focus on millennials?
Yeah, you can get different perspectives. Why don't we get the law firm perspective, and then we'll give the banking perspective.
Sure. No, it's an excellent question. I would say, when I started at a law firm, I think associates had a view of, well, I'll work in a law firm, I'll get good experience. If I like it, I like what I'm seeing, maybe I'll go for a partner. If I don't, I'll pay off my loans, I'll have a lot of opportunities. But still there was this view of, the law firm environment, law firm could be a career for your life. And I would say now the younger generation, the millennial generation, coming out of law school, a lot of times they go to law firms and the expectation is, well, I'll just work for a couple of years, get good experience, start to pay off my loans, but they don't even necessarily expect or think that it really could be a long-term career staying inside a law firm. And that's what I've seen is a sort of a shift over the last 15 to 20 years. I think once associates get inside the law firm environment, their perspectives may change, and I think also, at least speaking from a corporate transactional practice, they realize that meeting clients and exposure to many different industries and people, it really does open up a lot of opportunities, and a minority sees, well, maybe I want to stay in the law firm environment. But I think there really is, the going in expectation is very much different.
I think two different comments. Just so people know, I started at Goldman Sachs in M&A actually, right out of Colgate. So back in 1989, I started there. And I would say from a talent standpoint, there's still tons of talent. I can tell you a story which I'll leave for a moment, but there's still tons of talent, but yes, it's just much more competitive because, back in 1989, the jobs that everybody wanted was to get an analyst job on Wall Street, or even, when I graduated from Harvard Business School, my first year as an associate back at Goldman, I was in charge of Harvard Business School recruiting. And of the 800 people in that year's graduating class, about 700 applied for an associate position at Goldman Sachs. And maybe not everybody actually wanted it, but almost the entire class applied. Now it's very different. There's a lot more opportunities. People, with what's gone on in tech and a lot of other industries, people are more entrepreneurial, and there's just more competition, but there's still plenty of talent. But the other thing I'll say just on the flip side is I think the experience has deteriorated significantly at the junior levels on Wall Street. When I joined Goldman, as an analyst in M&A, I went to every meeting. The way they ran the firm back then was there were essentially either 3 people or 4 people on a team. You had a partner, a VP, an associate, and an analyst. Everyone went to everything. Everyone participated on every conference call. If there was a board meeting, I would be there. Maybe I wouldn't be at the table, I'd be at the seat against the wall, but I always went. Now, you see situations, and I see it now that I'm on a board, on multiple boards, I see it at the board level as well. You have 3 partners come. There's no analyst, there's no associate, there might not even be an MD, because it's also become so much more specialized. So you've got the M&A partner, you've got the debt partner, you've got the industry partner, and there's no room for the junior people. And so from an experiential standpoint, I would say in addition to maybe not as many people wanting to do it because there's more opportunities, I also think even if there weren't those other opportunities, the experience is not as good today.
If I could just take up on that point, I for the younger folks in the room who are analysts, associates, I would just like to say that B of A Merrill Lynch is where you need to be versus Goldman, because our associates and analysts go to all the meetings.
You don't have any quality partners.
Yeah. I thought you were picking on.
Oh, sorry.
You were picking on the guy right next to you.
What an opportunity to join hands together and attack Goldman Sachs, and you blew it.
We blew it. Sorry.
I'm joking, of course. I think that point is right on, and I was an analyst right out of Colgate as well, and I think the experience has very much changed for the reasons Melina mentioned. The other thing I might say, just on your broader question, is, and I think we, as in industry, at least on the investment banking side, we go through waves to some degree in terms of the experience of the juniors' lifestyle, and we're in a wave now which we've been in for a few years industry-wide, where there is a heavy focus on improving the quality of life for the juniors. Right, it's a very, very demanding workload, particularly right out of college, long hours, 80 to 100 hours a week, and it's for the associates as well. And it's probably not just an investment banking comment. I'd say the same thing from what I see for the associates at the law firms focused on M&A. But we're going through a period right now where we're intensely focused on establishing some balance and trying to create cultures which embrace some balance, instituting things like mandatory Saturdays off, or pick a day, Saturday or Sunday on the weekend, every weekend. We're all going through these initiatives, but very much a focus on improving the experience, quality of the experience to some degree, although I think that's where there's a lot of work to be done, but also in improving the lifestyle and the ability to kind of command a somewhat balanced life as somebody younger pursuing the M&A or investment banking profession broadly.
Well, this comment about the millennials is true. And so with my 3 children, because my eldest daughter spent, after law school, spent 6 months as Simpson Thatcher and said, what the hell do I want to do this for? I have my son Dylan, who spent 2.5 years at JP Morgan, now at Warby Parker, as I mentioned. So the millennials view things as, they basically don't view anything that they started as something they're going to do for more than 2 or 3 years. I actually think that that's healthy. And And as Melina says, there's no dearth of talent. We have plenty of people out there who still want to go into banking, even though it's become a low form of life. It used to be a respect. I've said this before. We literally are lower on the scale than Somali pirates. I mean, I think you would rather be a Somali pirate than an investment banker. We've run over a bit of time, but any more questions from anyone on the team? So we're good. So we're good. So I want to thank Patrick and David and Melina and Scott, and I want to thank all of you for coming.
With that, hi everybody, my name is Jeff Weaver. I'm the closer, and I will try to do a better job than my beloved New York Mets did a few weeks ago. But I also want to thank the panelists. Thank you. That was very, very interesting. I had the pleasure of coming last year as well, and this is really a fabulous event. And as Rob said, great to see the room so full. Thanks, Ken, for hosting 2 years in a row, and hopefully we can count on you again for next year. Jocelyn, thank you for your remarks. David Kuznet and Rob Silverman, who I saw before, thanks for organizing, guys. As I said, I'll make this brief. I'm a shareholder at Better Price, law firm here in town. I've been there 24 years, and to my colleagues here, I think law and finance is a great career, and I think Colgate sets you up very, very well for that. Colgate was a very special place for me. I met my wife there. I met some of my best friends there, and I really believe it set me up to excel in what came afterwards. I'm now father of 3 high school daughters, so I've been looking at a lot of different colleges and universities lately. Been to Colgate twice. So, but one thing you really note is all of these colleges and universities are just fabulous places. The campuses are great, the offerings are great. They're almost indistinguishable, and I say that, as a lifelong Colgate alum. But what separates Colgate is what happens after you graduate. And we've all seen the rankings, we've all seen the reports about how well Colgate alums do. But this Colgate network we have developed as alums is truly unprecedented. There is nothing like it. I talk to my friends up in Westchester. Rob lives near me. We've got lots of colleagues who've gone to lots of other universities and colleges, and they're just as, I don't see any other university that has a bond and a network of alums who are so committed and so involved in not only the university, the current students of the university, and most importantly, the young graduates of the university. And we really make an effort through events like this and through involvement to sort of raise the bar for everyone who's a Colgate person. So in that respect, I'd like to thank the people tonight who gave a gift to the internship fund. This is something which is relatively new. I certainly didn't know about it, but I think it's been around for a couple of years. Obviously, we hear a lot these days about internships and how important they are. Combining a Colgate education with the benefit of actually working, oftentimes for free, is really helps a lot of our young alumni very much, as well as our students. So I would encourage you all to consider supporting the internship fund. I think it really will go a long way to helping some of our students and young alums to get that experience they need, so that when they do go into the workforce, they've actually had some practical work experience, which is really critical. So not surprisingly, there's lots of people here from Colgate who can help you discuss what you can do to help Colgate, help the internship fund. So I'd encourage you to reach out to them. I mean, there's a lot of other things we can all do to support Colgate, either by giving your time or contributing. So I know it's all in you, so I appreciate it if you can do a little more. All right? So thank you very much. Good evening. Thanks again, guys.